Hello, I'm James Sproule, Chief Economist here at the IOD, and I'm joined by Jaideep Prabhu, who is a professor of marketing at the University of Cambridge. He's just written a book on frugal innovation, and this is an absolutely fantastic book. I love the concept. One of the things that really struck me is we've heard a lot about globalization for the last 20 years. This is the first time I think that we've seen a globalization trend which has come from emerging markets, and or certainly they're as involved as the developing markets. Is this something that you found particularly exciting about?
Yes, having grown up in an emerging market, India, and then having spent the rest of my life in the West, it's been very interesting for me to explore the parallels, the similarities, but also the differences between how frugal innovation is done in countries like India or various African economies with how frugal innovation is being done now in the West, in the UK, and even in East Asia, in Japan.
What do you think are some of the things that any company, whether they be in India or Europe or America, what are some of the big lessons that they can draw out of frugal innovation?
Well, it's really about how to do things faster, better, cheaper. And the big revolution that's happened around the world is that people are increasingly empowered to do more with less. Small teams with relatively few resources can now do what only large companies
So
could
barriers to entry have fallen or
do.
eliminated.
Dramatically. Innovation used to be a very expensive thing that only the world's largest companies with big R&D labs and huge budgets and very smart scientists could do. But now, sometimes even kids sitting in their bedrooms can innovate. We've seen that in software, obviously, with things like apps and games. But now we're seeing that with hardware. So you have cheap computers, $35 computers, you have the Raspberry Pi, you have the Arduino, and you have the Internet of Things, they have cheap sensors, and they can make things that solve problems that they encounter on a daily basis.
I think this is one of the most exciting things that we've seen coming through in the business arena in the last few years. How's this going to impact upon governments? How are governments going to react to all this as well?
That's a great question. I get asked that question all the time. And I'm not an expert on government, but I do interact with policymakers and bureaucrats in countries like India, here in the UK, places like Bangladesh, Malaysia, etc. And I think people in The Economist, for instance, have pointed out how in the last 30 years we've seen a huge revolution in productivity and efficiency in the private sector. And the perception, at least, is that government is yet to catch up. So that said, I would say that governments are increasingly doing this kind of thing themselves. An example, for instance, out of India is the Unique ID project, which was actually initiated by someone who'd made his money in software, Nandan Nilekani, who was the founder of Infosys, one of India's largest software companies. And he took on this challenge of doing this within government in a large country like India, giving everyone a unique ID. And the way he went about it, the way he thought through the processes, as well as the technical issues, was impressive. So I think governments are able to do this. And I encounter bureaucrats who on a daily basis are finding out smart ways to give citizens services faster, better, cheaper. But I think there's a way to go. And I think the big revolution we'll see in government will be along these lines of frugal innovation, doing more with less, and often with citizens.
I think this really proves one of the points that I've made again and again, which is there's times in an economy when government and politicians can lead, and there's times when business can lead. And I think what you've pointed out is frugal innovation is clearly a business time for business to lead and governments to take on some of those lessons. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming along to the ID and presenting your ideas to our members.
Thank you, James.